In this episode of the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast, I have a special guest, Alec Kichian. A lot of you know him as NBA Draft Point on Twitter. Had a big summer covering the international prospects, and that is why he is here. Today, we're going to talk about the top international newcomers in college basketball for the 24-25 season. Stay tuned for Alec's podcast debut. Shout out to each and every person that has made the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Rafael Barlowe, the director of scouting for NBA Big Board. And before I get too deep into this episode, I want to let you know that it is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA. You can get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today, because what time is it? Game time. All right, let's get started. So this episode is something that I'm excited to talk about. I'm glad to be working with Alec. Well, it's been out, but I released the top 40 international prospects that are playing outside of the U.S. So there's quite a few guys that were born in the 2006 generation. Let me rephrase that. I released the top 40 2006 born generation prospects playing outside of the U.S. And there's quite a few guys that are still in high school that were born in 2006. And then there's some that are freshmen, and we'll cover a few of them in this episode. But it was a big deal just because I spent all summer watching the FIBA tournaments. And for me, it even started before that with the Adidas Next Generation tournament. And I mean, I would say it was hundreds of hours of work. And I put together a detailed scouting report on all 40 prospects. I think I probably have about 50 or 60 from the 2006 generation total, but Alec ranked them in his top 40. And so today we're just going to talk about a few guys that are going to be playing college basketball this year. Some were born in 2006, one a little bit older, but just wanted to get Alec's opinion on a few of these prospects. But first of all, thank you for coming on. I know this is your podcast debut. Don't be nervous. It's just,
I'm honored to be here. I've been watching this podcast since I was in high school. So for me,
that makes me feel old.
So this is fun for me, podcast debut, but it's good to see that what I've been putting out on Twitter has panned out. I had a big summer watching all the FIBA events. I think there's one left. The Afro basket is almost done, but everything else so far, U16, U17, U18, U20, I've been doing my best to cover it as best as I can and kind of get into that international scene while I still can.
Man, you covered it perfectly. I'm like, how are you covering all these tournaments? I mean, as soon as the game ends, you got somewhat of a recap. You've been breaking down your top performers. So you're definitely the hardest working guy on Twitter. I will say that much. And so
thank you, appreciate
I had to scoop you up and get your opinion. Let's go into Will Riley. Will is going to Illinois. I've only had a chance to watch him play live once, and I was at Basketball Without Borders. I just wanted to get your opinion on Will. I know he's from Canada. You're based out of Canada, and you have him as your number one ranked player in 2006. Am I correct about that?
My number one ranked international prospect going to college.
Okay, going to college.
Yeah.
And what do you have overall in just 2006 in general?
I believe I had him somewhere in the late lottery, maybe 12, 13, something like that.
So you're high on him.
I'm high on him. I really like his game.
All right, and what do you like most about Will Riley's game?
He's just a scorer, man. He's a 3-level guy, or almost 3-level guy. He's elite at 6'8", 6'9", plays the 2-guard, wing, and he's just a flat out scorer. He's one of those guys that once he gets hot, he really gets hot. He had a game in EYBL. I think it was his best performance. He won the EYBL in the session MVP, I'm pretty sure, or offensive MVP. He put out this game where he had 42 points with 6 threes, 5 assists, and he just looked ridiculous. If you look at the tape of that game, you're he keeps making these difficult, super far shots, and you're how is he doing that?
I'm not as high on Will, and I understand why people will be really high on him. When I watched him play, he reminds me, and this, I don't want this to sound like a negative, even though I just said I'm not as high on him as the consensus, but he's like a bigger J.R. Smith. And I like J.R. Smith. I mean, the confidence, the shot making, you're going to get some bad shots out of him. But to me, guys that take bad shots, usually that comes with having a high level of confidence. And I usually prefer a guy that is overconfident than a guy that is not confident, because a guy that's not confident is going to pass up open shots. And that's like one of the fastest ways to kill an offense, is if you're afraid to shoot. But I get why people like him. And I guess maybe I was a little off him because he won MVP at Basketball Without Borders, and I didn't think he was one of the top 5 players there. I was shocked. I thought that a guy that we're going to talk about later on, Hamad Musa, was the best player at Basketball Without Borders. But Will is exciting, and I've seen some people have him as a potential first round pick, and then I've also seen draft boards that don't even have him at all. And so, how do you think his style of play is going to fit at Illinois? Do you think Brad Underwood is going to give him the freedom that he needs to be successful? Because he's a guy that likes to color outside the lines, and I think freedom is probably the most important thing for him.
So he's the highest recruit in Illinois history. And like right behind him is Morez Johnson, who's also in this draft
That
class.
has
And
to be like recent memory. I mean, I'm old enough to remember a guy named Marcus Liberty who was like super high. Then you got your Kendall Gills and Nick Andersons, and I mean
I don't
that
know.
was that
on
was
on 247, it says that he's the highest ranked, at least in the modern
yeah, that
era.
was
I don't know, in the
yeah.
recruiting
I
era.
mean, Illinois has some really really good
Mhm.
recruits. But yeah, go ahead.
But yeah, so I think if you get a guy to reclass and play for your program, and he's the highest recruit in recent memory, I think you're giving him the freedom, especially with some of the other offers he had. Yeah, like Kentucky, Alabama, that easily, if he stayed in the next year's class, could have been like their top dog, like for sure, guaranteed. So I think Illinois is going to give him the freedom. Also, they have a lot of guards, but they don't have too many like bigger wings. And I think that's why he's going to play the wing. I think he'll start for them. And I think he'll have the freedom to kind of shoot the ball because they do have a lot of other guys that are more kind of conservative or passers. You know, they have Kasparas Jakucionis, we're going to talk about later. Some other guys, like they brought in Kylan Boswell. They have a few good big men in Morris Johnson and Tomislav Ivisic. I believe he's related to Zvonimir. I think they're brothers, but I'm not
Yeah,
100%.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. He was
So,
supposed to go to SMU, I heard, and
mm,
I heard the story that he actually committed. Maybe it was verbal or whatever, and then at the last minute, Illinois came and swooped him up. I've heard NIL was a big factor in that, but but yeah, that's Zvonimir's brother, and I'm a big Zvonimir Isavic fan.
but yeah, so just overall, I think again, they could really benefit from having a guy who just shoots the ball, and when he's hot, he can win you games. Like you said, when he's not, he can shoot you out of games. I do like the J.R. Smith comp, even though he is one of my favorite players. I like it, but you are right in that case. So I think he'll have the freedom at least to start out the year. I think they have enough complementary options to make it so that he can shoot the ball and he can have his freedom. And he's also a decent playmaker, so he's not like a negative playmaker in my opinion. I think he does take like crazy shots, but in EYBL and in Phelps, when I watched his game, he's had some really nice passes that make you think of like, hey, maybe there's a bit more upside than just a scorer in there.
Do you think Underwood is going to have to tone him down some?
Maybe a bit. Maybe a bit. I think they'll let him do a lot, but I think again with all the other options they have, like I know this is a very freshman heavy team, this Illinois team, but also they have a lot of options on there and a lot of guys who are going to make for a pretty strong squad. So I think they'll give him the freedom, but they will kind of tone him down a bit, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't know why I'm not as high on him as the consensus. And like I said, it could just be for the fact that I thought others outplayed him at Basketball Without Borders. And I like J.R. Smith. And the funny thing about JR is I went to I was fortunate enough, I think it was like probably like 10 years ago, and Carmelo Anthony had like this private run of some of his best friends in the NBA, and it was at his gym in New York City. I happened to be there. Kemba Walker was there. Kevin Durant showed up. This was like a young Tobias Harris. I think Tim Hardaway Jr. was in his rookie year. Nerlens Noel. It was quite a few guys, and they just played pickup every day for a week. And I promise you, if you didn't know names and you just walked into the gym and you just saw guys play and you had to do a draft over who was the best player there, it would have been debatable between J.R. Smith, Carmelo, and Kevin Durant. That's how good J.R. Smith is in pickup as far as just like the shot making and creativity and hitting tough shots. And he just had to settle in the NBA as a role as like a six man and as a shooter. He's definitely more than a shooter, definitely a scorer. But that's the first comparison I had when I saw Will Riley. Like this is a bigger, not as athletic as a young JR. Young JR was
Yeah, he's next level.
crazy, jumping off the left leg, right leg. But I thought Will was like a bigger version of JR. All right, when we return, we're going to talk about a guy that I think could be a top five pick in the 2025 NBA draft. I don't think his production is going to be great, but I think he just is just going to have to show flashes, and that is Duke's Khaman Maluach. And in the next segment, we're going to talk about Maluach, and I'm going to get Alex's opinion on Khaman and if he thinks that he could be a top five pick. But before we get into that, I want to talk about Game Time because Game Time is my favorite app when it comes to buying tickets to sporting events. But it's not just sporting events. You can get tickets to concerts, comedies, theaters, and more. And Game Time has this all-in pricing. All you have to do is toggle this feature. It shows you the total up front. And there's no surprise fees at checkout. All you have to do is put in all-in pricing and you will get the total cost. So you won't be surprised. Also, Game Time gives you views of your seat. You get a panoramic view of the seat in the app before you buy, and they have the lowest price guarantee. Lowest price guarantee or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Talk about standing on business. And your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. All you have to do is download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code Locked On NBA, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the redeem code LOCKEDON NBA. You can get $20 off your first purchase. Once again, thank you for making the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. Now, for your second listen, you have to check out the Locked On NBA podcast because there is no offseason in the NBA, and Locked On NBA provides daily basketball analysis from national and local experts, and you get it in 30 minutes or less. No one keeps you as informed and entertained as Locked On NBA. It is available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. It is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, originally, I thought we'd be able to cover two prospects in the first segment. We went a little overtime on Will Riley, but now let's talk about Khaman Maluach. And me and my brother did a show where we talked about him briefly. I'm going to do an episode of just the individual scouting report, a full episode dedicated to him. I like him. I saw him at Basketball Without Borders. I think that he's going to, in my opinion, I think that he's going to be a top five pick in this draft, even though I don't think he's going to have top five production. I just think with his age and the flashes and his size and his skill set fits the modern NBA, I think that he's going to be one of the better long-term prospects. But I don't think that statistically he's going to be one of the best international prospects in this class. So what are your thoughts on Maluach?
So he's a big guy. So 7'2", 250. He's listed at that 7'5" wingspan, I believe. Something 7'4", 7'5". And he's like a massive presence. Like you saw him play in the Olympics for South Sudan on that team that almost upset Team USA. And he looked good. Like he was guarding Anthony Davis. He had this like it's his fadeaway on Joel Embiid that was like he had a catch and shoot three in the corner. He had this block on AD, and he just looked good. Like he looked like he was in his place. And I feel like he's a guy that I think it was Hoop Summit that maybe he didn't look as good. He looked raw compared to other prospects. He didn't have like the craziest stat line. And then every time since then, we've kind of seen him. He's gotten better and better, especially like when you see scrimmages of like Duke's like summer scrimmages. I've seen that he looks really good. He looks ready. Great shot blocker, like really good shot blocker. His positional, his his positioning is really good. I like on defense, and the offense is coming. And I think that with all the other options on Duke's roster, I think again his production might not be the highest, but I think that he'll definitely have a role, and it'll definitely be something that front offices are enticed by.
Yeah, I think he could have a Derek Lively type role impact statistically. I mean, Lively got off to a slow start because he had a calf injury. But Maluach, like when I saw him at Basketball Without Borders, one of the things I did like about him was that he was very active. He was talkative. He, just plays with a lot of passion. And then I do think that there is promise that he's going to be able to knock down open shots, which is something that we heard about Lively. I saw with my own eyes that Derek Lively, I mean, I've seen him make like 10 corner threes in a row. And I'm curious to see if Maluach will have the freedom to shoot threes. I do have some concerns about the fit. I do think that even though Cooper Flag can space the floor, I do wonder, like with just all the pieces on Duke's roster, is he going to be able? Will they have the spacing to get him the looks that he needs? I think he's going to be better in the NBA when there's floor spacing all over the floor. But I had this conversation, and it was a person that I respect a lot as far as like evaluating talent. And he's not really high. This person was not really high on South Sudanese players because he's like, they don't have the frame to always succeed because no matter what, whether it's you move them to the States and they have an American diet, they're usually very thin. And when you look for usually even in Africa, when you look for African prospects, the first thing you're looking for is a big. And he mentioned that a lot of the South Sudanese bigs are talented, but they struggle to get over 220, 230, and if they can get to 230. But he mentioned Maluach has the size and as far as like the thickness that he does look like he'll be able to put on weight. And then we talked about it, it never crossed my mind until he mentioned it. He was like, the best South Sudanese player ever is Luau Dang. And he mentioned Luau Dang was he had a little bit more weight to him than other prospects. So do you think that Maluach could possibly be the best South Sudanese player?
I mean, I think there's a chance. I mean, look, I don't want to discount any prospect before they even play a game in college, right?
Smart.
Again, putting expectations like that too is crazy. But I think the fact that he's 17, he's built like this already. He's built like a man. Like you see, I just saw like a clip of him yesterday in media day that he looked like big,
Yep.
and that's it's already a good sign, you know. Like he has the instincts, and like you said, I don't know how really they're gonna maximize him at Duke. I think he's a good fit there. I think they might start Malik over him, the transfer out of Syracuse.
Yeah.
That's just my personal opinion because I'm a big fan of Malik also, and I think he's like super versatile. But I think they might finish off games with Maluach. I think the size is going to be really useful when it comes to ACC play. I think they have one of the bigger groups in the ACC.
They
I think
gotta
that's
have the biggest.
they
They
gotta have the
have to.
biggest group. Like
Yeah.
their point guards are big. Like
Yeah.
that's crazy. So I think that he has the chance to maybe be one of the better South Sudanese players. I think the frame is there. He has the upside. We'll just have to see him play to kind of figure that out.
All right, before we get into the next segment, I want to talk about Will Riley's teammate at Illinois, Kasparas. How I'll let you pronounce the last name.
Jakucionis.
Jakucionis. I was going to say Jakucionis. Now I've seen him play live a couple of times. I know at Basketball Without Borders, there were some people that were really high on him, and I guess it was like, there's multiple courts at the event, and he had like a really good game on another court, and I missed it. And then when I saw him play on the court that I was watching, he had a so-so performance, but then he had a really, really big Adidas Next Generation tournament. And Illinois has some guards. They have some guards. They brought in Kylan Boswell, who's like from Champaign and left and went back home. What do you see his role as a freshman?
So that's my thing with him is that I'm not exactly sure what his role is going to be like or how we're going to kind of translate from his role at Barcelona to Illinois. At Barcelona, he was a playmaker. He's 6'4". He's like really creative playmaker. You see him, he has like these like skip passes, these touch passes, these really creative passes, and he creates a really good rapport with his bigs. I think the fact that he had the most dominant bigs in the Adidas Next Generation tournament maybe came to his advantage. Sion Keita, Mohamed Dabone, Abraham Kone, I think are their names. All three of them are giant
The
and elite
alleged
bigs.
12-year-old
Alleged.
DeBono.
I mean, he's good. That's what matters. So
Yeah.
from there, I think he was really good at just getting them the ball a lot, and he had like some insane playmaking games. He led the tournament or the finale in assists. I'm pretty sure with 9 assists a
Yep.
game, and I think that it probably won't be at that level at Illinois because there is a very deep guard room. You said with Kylan Boswell, they also have Ty Rogers, I believe is his name, Dre Gibbs Lawhorn. They have a ton of guys that need the ball, and that's why I kind of favor Will Riley over him in a bit, just because I think that the positional size is going to come to his advantage. But I do know that Kasparas apparently has impressed a ton during summer camp at Illinois. I think the guys there love him. The fans absolutely love him. So I think that he will have maybe a smaller role, and I think that he won't really have a problem adjusting to that smaller role. Maybe draft wise, that might create some stuff with him, but I think he's a guy that's unselfish enough that he'll kind of adapt to that smaller role, but also can take over when he needs to.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see his role because, like you mentioned, there's not a clear path to a lot of playing time, but he's fun to watch. He has, he's I don't want to compare him to every Lithuanian guard because sometimes, like at least for me, when I watch a lot of international basketball, there's like I can watch a guard play and I can say, oh, he's from Spain or he's from Slovenia. Like I feel like all the Slovenian guards kind of play like Luka. Spanish guards have this flash and flair and this freedom with their passes. But I think like he combines a little bit of what I've seen out of Lithuanian guards in the past with some of the Spanish flair that you see out of Spanish point guards. And obviously playing in Barcelona's system could have a big reason why he plays the way he plays. All right, when we return, we're going to talk about three more prospects. We're going to try to squeeze three more prospects in this last segment. But let's talk about FanDuel because you've heard us talk about FanDuel before, and that's because it's America's #1 sports book. Well, we have something a little different for you. Now, through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5. You can get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then, with the YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. So just visit fanduel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. All right, last segment. Egor Demin. Did I say it right?
Demin, I think so. Igor.
It's
I'm not
it's
exactly sure. We'll see when he plays at BYU.
I have to ask him. I have to ask him. I know I saw like an Instagram video where he said everybody pronounces his last name, and then he said a lot of people get it confused with denim. It looks like denim, and like maybe it's just the American mind. It looks like denim. But what are your overall thoughts on Igor?
So Igor has that dribble pass shoot kind of upside to him. I know there's some performances that you see that he doesn't shoot the ball well from three. I think overall he's a good shooter, but I think in the ANGT final he averaged like 14% from three. And but like in the past he shot well from three. So that's kind of like the swing skill to me. But I think he has the upside to be kind of like a dribble pass shoot guy. He's like 6'8", 6'9". He's another guy who's like kind of a guard. I don't know if you want to class him as a guard, but
I think he's a guard. Yeah.
he has the playmaking to be some type of guard, and he's going to have the freedom to play as a guard too. And that's what I like about the fact that he's going to BYU is that he's with Kevin Young, who's like an NBA level coach, and he's going to have the freedom to basically just do what he can do and kind of develop and make mistakes as he goes along. So that's what I kind of think of him.
Yeah, my brother and I, we talked about that in a past episode. We thought that him going to BYU was just an excellent choice. I think it gives him the freedom to play his game while being at a Power Five conference and not having the pressure of being a one and done in a sense. I think if you go to certain schools, you got to get in and out because if you don't perform well as a freshman, they got the next highly touted prospect coming in. And I do think like going to a Duke or Kentucky in the past, which I guess Alabama or Arkansas going forward, and maybe even Alabama and some of these other schools, I do think that there is this pressure. If you're highly touted, you got to get in and out because if you don't, that next top five prospect or 5-star prospect is coming in. Possibly could play the same position, but I've had a chance to watch Igor play a few times in person. I went to Madrid last fall, watched him play. Definitely impressed by the size. He's actually one of those guys that's bigger than what he looks. Like if you see him on the court, and maybe it's because he has such a baby face, but you stand next to him, you're like, all right, this guy's 6'9". And then when you look at like his face, you're like, he might not be done growing. He could get to 6'10". And so
That'll
I
be crazy.
yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to seeing him play. What do you think his, and I guess you kind of hinted at it earlier, but what do you think his natural position is? Do you think they're going to put the ball in his hands, or do you think he's going to have to play like a combo? And then sometimes when you're that size and you can shoot, it's easy to just put you on the wing. Like, how do you see BYU using him?
I think they're going to use them as a combo. I think they have some guards on their team that are going to be the main playmakers. They do have like a pretty new team. Like a lot of their guys are guys that weren't on the team last year, so they're going to create kind of like a different type of a group. But I think he's going to play either as a two or like a combo guard or somewhere on the wing. I think they're going to give him the ball. They're going to give him the ball to at least like kind of field it out in the beginning and kind of give him that freedom, that creativity. And I think that's going to also come with the fact that he does have an NBA level coach. He was an assistant coach on the Suns, I believe, was
Hmm. Is it a
most
G
likely,
League? Is a G
yeah.
League coach? Yeah.
So I do think they'll give him the ball. I think they'll let him play. And I think maybe as the season goes on, depending on what works, what doesn't work, they might kind of like shift him to the wing. I hope they don't just make him like a catch and shoot guy
Yeah.
and they just don't just put him in the corner 24/7. I know NBA teams do like that, but I think there's so much more to his game to the point that I think they're going to test it about a bit in the beginning.
And that's why I think BYU was a great choice for him. I think if he goes to other programs and he's shooting the ball well with his size, they're going to say, oh, play in the corner, play the wing. So I do think he's going to have the opportunity to play with the ball in his hands. All right, let's talk about Hamad Musa, the guy that I was a huge fan of with basketball outboards. I thought he was the most impressive player there from the shooting, the passing, and just he just looks like he's having a lot of fun playing basketball. And then I was just disappointed to see that whoever the coach was at Hoop Summit just didn't play him. Like he played like spot minutes here and there, and I just thought that I don't know. I just thought that I mean it's an all-star game in a sense. It's not like a regular season game. Give the kid an opportunity. He came from Qatar, and you don't play him. But I think he's going to be good at Dayton. I think he's going to be Dayton's next NBA player. We've seen Obi Toppin, we've seen Deron Holmes. What are your thoughts on Musa?
So he's one of those guys that when you watch, you can really see the feel, like you were saying, that he enjoys playing basketball, but also you could see like the playmaking feel or just the overall feel for basketball. He's like 6'7", 6'8", has like a 7 foot wingspan. He moves really well. He's super fluid when he scores. He's one of those guys that I haven't watched too much of because the tape is kind of hard to get to
Yeah,
because he didn't play in the States. He didn't play in the NGTs. Those are like my main kind of few sources.
yeah,
But he's one of those guys that I'm sure he grew up as a guard and then he became like 6'7", 6'8", and you could tell like in his movements, the passing, the shooting, it's really good. I watched a few of the scrimmages of the Basketball Without Borders. I thought that he most likely did deserve the MVP as well. I
yeah.
think for me it was between him and Will. I mean, obviously I have the kind of like leaning towards Will because he is from Canada and he's like a guy that I really like, but I do really like Hamad Musa, and I think that Dayton's gonna be a great place for him. Like you said, they had Deron Holmes, they had Obi Toppin, Tumani Kamara, I believe, as well in the last few years.
Yeah, I knew I forgot somebody.
And yeah, so I think they're gonna give him the opportunity. He's gonna play, and even if he's not a one and done, I think it'll be a one and done. But even if he's not a one and done, I think next year he could have a giant season. He could have like a decent season this year, and then come back and be like a top pick. I think.
Yeah, I had talked with someone close to him, and they were upset that I left him off my list of like my top 10 freshmen. I think for him that he's gonna be, and I mean, I hope I'm wrong for his sake. I think it's just gonna take another year because his body is so thin. I mean, the A10 is it's not a conference that is full of freshmen. It's kind of
Mhm.
like an older conference. I just think he may need a year just because he'll need to get stronger. But he's fun to watch, and I mean, I don't know if you've heard like the background. His dad played like 25 years professionally. I mean, I'm joking a little bit, but I know he played a long time. Like he just retired, and so when you watch him and you see like the feel for the game, you can tell like
He's been
he's
around the
been
game.
around it a lot, and he's kind of has some advantages because he's just a smart player, really smart player, not like a crazy athlete, but just knows how to maximize every ounce of his God-given talent. All right, let's talk about Fedor Zugic. He came on the podcast a few years back. I want to say it was like during COVID when there was like nothing going on. And I've been following his career for, I guess it's been 4 years now. Probably one of the more interesting prospects in college basketball because he's played, is it 4 years professionally
I
or
think he's
5 years?
played. I think it's 4 years professionally and then 5 years in like U19, U21 since he was like 15. So he's a ridiculous guy. Like one of my favorite prospects to come out to
Yeah, I mean,
college basketball this year.
he played in like Germany's top league, and I had a school reach out to me about him, and I was like, "What? Like, how is he eligible?" And now I have no idea like who's eligible and who's not. And I saw John Hollinger made a funny comment saying Sergio Yui to Duke next year. And so
Yeah, it's funny.
yes, if you're not familiar with Sergio Yui's or Ewell, he's like one of the best Spanish guards of all time, definitely a legend in Spain. And the Houston Rockets, I know at one point they had his rights, and I remember Daryl Morey saying like, "We've offered him money to come, he just doesn't want to come." So anyway, but yeah, I mean, Fedor's, I know he's experienced. I mean, he's played high level basketball professionally, and for him to come in as a freshman, I mean, I just think that was a very good signing for Creighton. I think he's ready to come in and play right away. But what do you think about him overall as a prospect?
So this for me, this was like an absolute win-win for both Fedor and Creighton. Creighton, who basically now they have Ryan Kalkbrenner and four shooters in their
Yeah.
lineup. This guy is like was one of the best movement shooters as a prospect that in the last year.
I mean,
Like he
really, if you think about it, at least for me, it's been like the last 3 years. I've thought that he was a fringe NBA prospect. And I've even had some people reach out to me and ask me, like, why is he not getting enough to NBA draft love? Because he has the size and he has a defined skill set as a shooter, but he's a movement shooter.
And that's kind of what makes this whole new era of NIL so special is that these guys that kind of started their Euro careers young and kind of fell behind now have a chance to kind of break out into the eye of the American audience, the audience of the people that are watching the most. And that's kind of like what I'm trying to do with my Twitter page a lot, just trying to push these guys that maybe won't be in the eye of the Americans or North Americans, let's say, and kind of get them more into the public's eye. So I really do like Fedor Zugic. He's, like I said, movement shooter. He shoots really well. Saw him at the Adidas camp in Treviso. I
Mhm.
think I watched the highlights of him, and he's a lot better of an athlete than you'd think.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people say his finishing isn't the greatest, but he's a good athlete. I saw him like catch a lob. He's like all of 6'6", 6'7". He's gonna probably start at the three for them. And like I said, the lineup of Stephen Ashworth, Pop Isaacs, him, Jackson McAndrew, and Ryan Kalkbrenner, that's like a dangerous lineup of like
Yeah.
putting like four really good shooters around him. Also, the fact that Zugic is like a 21-year-old freshman with 4 years of eligibility and 5 years of experience, that's kind of ridiculous. So,
And I keep forgetting he's only 21. And 21-year-old freshman does sound older, but he's just been on at least my radar for about 4 or 5 years now. I know he's played at a high level. I would have thought he was 23. I mean, if you look at his overall experience, he has the experience of a 23-year-old. But as far as like bringing attention to some of these international prospects that kind of can get lost in the shuffle for, like I always tell people, there's no high school basketball in Europe. So you're like playing on your national team or you're playing for a club team, and then the next step is like professional. And there's like no college to help you between ages 18 through 22. And that's why I think that college basketball is going to be the best option going forward. Even though you can make a case and say quite a few of the guys, from Alex Sarr to Nikola Topic and Risa Shea stayed home or stayed away from the United States last year, and they helped their draft stock. But I do think that we're going to start seeing a lot of international players playing college basketball in the States, which is why I started Big Board Global, which is the scouting service for college coaches that are looking to stay ahead on the top international prospects. And check it out. And bigboardglobal.com, Alec released his top 40 2006 players that are playing outside of the state. So check it out. And once again, thank you for making the Locked On NBA Big Board podcast your first listen of the day. Now you gotta check out the Locked On NBA podcast because there is no off season on Locked On, and then you get the local experts and you get the national experts. So it's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Big thank you to Alec for coming on. First podcast. I think it was a success, and we'll definitely have you on again. Once again, it's Rafael Barlowe with my main NBA. Well, I don't even want to label you just NBA. International scouting guru, Alec Kichian, and we are out of here.